Before we get into the aspect of your clients are getting $1,000 and potentially more, or even getting some of their debt wiped out as well, let's go right to the callers.
Sure.
We have Jessica from Jacksonville. Jessica, good evening. Appreciate you taking the time to call us. And what question do you...
Hi there.
Hi,
Jessica.
Thank you for taking my call. I have a question. I keep getting calls from these debt collectors, and I don't know what bills they're trying to collect on. And when I ask them what it is, they don't give me any information. And I don't have any outstanding bills. What recourse do I have?
Good question.
Well, that's actually, it could be two things. Number one, it could be a debt collector violating the law. Under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the law that we've been discussing throughout this segment, they have to disclose who they are, what they're collecting on, who the original creditor is, who the current creditor is, and the type of information that would allow an individual like yourself to understand who's owed this debt. The second thing that this could be a scam. There is a lot of organizations out there, or even sole individuals, that do gain public information on consumer debt or purchase information on consumer debt and attempt to act as if they are debt collectors. And the situation you're describing may be the fact that he just doesn't have that information, and most people wouldn't even ask that information, and he's just hoping that you end up taking your credit card out the purse and tendering over some payment. So it could be a series of things, but I do encourage you to contact an attorney, a consumer law attorney. The Florida Bar has good references, or you can also call us, and we'll be more than happy to investigate the matter.
She's in Jacksonville. Do you take cases all throughout the state?
We do, throughout the state. Absolutely.
And they don't have to come to your office?
No,
obviously.
they don't. Actually, probably about 60% of our clients, we can start a lawsuit without actually having to meet face to face.
Way I understand it, Jessica, it's important to have a pen and paper by the phone, because you need to know who's calling you and write down their phone number. Am I right?
Absolutely, and also for evidentiary purposes, that's also a good idea.
Now we do have.
Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Thank you, Jessica. Keep on listening, and appreciate you calling in all the way from Jacksonville.
Love your show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. We were alluding to regarding $1,000 from the creditor. So the creditor could owe you money?
Well, let's not confuse things. We're talking about the debt collectors. A creditor and a debt collector is different. Just to clarify and give an example, let's assume you open a Macy's store card. Macy's is the creditor. Let's assume that for whatever reason you weren't able to pay that bill, and it went to a debt collection company and they called you. That is obviously the debt collector. The person that collects on a debt other than the original creditor is the debt collector. I don't want to make things very complicated, but the rule does apply to both, because we can use another statute, the Florida statute, to attack the original creditor. But it seems like you're trying to touch on damages, Phil, and I'll get into that right now. Clients, when there's any violation of these statutes, they are entitled to up to $1,000 in statutory damages.
Wow.
Statutory damages means that there just has to be a violation. The client does not have to have had actually suffered a monetary loss.
So in other words, you get your fees. You don't get it out of $1,000.
No,
that
goes to the client.
Right.
That goes to the client.
You know something, because we only have just a few minutes left. Let's go right to the callers and take all their calls. We have Joe from Hollywood. Good evening, Joe.
Good evening. Hey, I love your show there.
Thank you.
Thanks. Can a debt collector contact anyone else about my debt?
It depends. There are provisions that allow them to contact somebody one time only for purposes of trying to locate you. They can certainly not disclose information about your debt. And they can. So the answer to that is it depends, and I would have to have more facts on that, and I could properly advise you.
Yeah, you should call them in their office. We're going to be giving out the contact information as well. Joe, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'll definitely contact the office there.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, stay tuned for their website and contact information at the end of this segment.
We have Sherry from Boynton Beach. Good evening, Sherry.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for taking my call.
Appreciate you taking the time. I know the weather's miserable. What question do you have for the attorneys?
Well, it's similar to a previous question, but it's weird. I get people, the same company, I guess, is calling me to try and locate my ex-husband for debt and I haven't been. I mean, he's my ex-husband, and we haven't been married for 20 years. Why are they calling me, and how do I get them to stop calling me?
That's a
and
good
and
question.
I don't even have the same last name. We've got different last names. It's weird.
Well, good evening. This is Thomas Patty. I'll take your question instead. The way it works when you're married, the law views you as one entity. However, you mentioned that you're no longer married, so that is significant. The fact that you're being called and you've asked them to stop calling, that in and of itself is a violation. The reason for them to continue calling, however, I have no idea. But I can tell you that that's something that happens all the time. They habitually violate the law, and that's typically and I don't mean to point out the fact that there's no reason to sometimes call people, but in these instances, there isn't. So
I understand. So in other words, my ignoring these calls or hanging up or not paying any attention to them after I've already informed them that I have no information on this person is perfectly okay.
It's perfectly okay for you to ignore those calls, but it's not okay for them to continue calling. So in particular, beyond the FDCPA, there's another statute called the TCPA. It's a bunch of alphabet soup over here. But the Telephonic Customer Protection Act is the TCPA, and it's designed to protect against harassing phone calls. So it works in both home telephones as well as cellular telephones. But instead of just being entitled to statutory damages for all their violations, because you're limited under the FDCPA, for each call that they call you, and for each time they call you, which is a violation, it's between $500 and $1,500 per call.
Appreciate you calling in, Sherry. We do have some other callers. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And thank you very much. I appreciate the information.
Appreciate you
ma'am.
listening, and please listen to the end because we'll give out the contact information. I know, Mike, it's you always have a saying regarding it's the letter of the law. So you had a question regarding letters.
No, I did. We talked a lot about harassing phone calls. What can a consumer look for if they're getting repeated letters or just even one letter? What do they look for in those types of collection letters coming from collection agencies?
Well, as right off the bat, I'd say what they should look for is more than likely an attorney who can handle those. Particularly, we do. If you send us a copy of the letter, even with your cell phone, take a picture of the front and back. We'll take a look at it and let you know. But there's certain disclosures that need to be contained in those letters, depending on the sequence of letters. For example, the first letter needs to contain 5 separate disclosures. 1 being the name of the collector, 2 being the amount of the debt, and 3, 4, and 5 are kind of all wrapped up in one, which are related to your rights to validate the debt. In addition to that, it kind of becomes more so of a sequencing issue, but it's also not just what the letter needs to include, it's what they are not stating themselves. If statements are misleading, if they use language which can be construed one way when it's intended to mean another, that is also a violation.
Wow.
If you tell the collector, please don't call me anymore. I don't have the money, whether it's medical debt, credit card, you just say, stop calling me. Is that enough, or do you have to do more?
Absolutely, it is enough. If someone says, I'm not paying this debt, if someone says, please stop calling, the statute provides for rights of the individual, which states that you need to stop calling, seek a different recourse. Our philosophy is this. If you're not able to be paid and you're a debt collector, or rather you're the collector, if you can't be paid, seek legal recourse, file a lawsuit. Don't continue to harass these people.
Sherry called from Boynton Beach regarding debt that she was not responsible for. And there's something that you guys were explaining to me called zombie debt. It seems like we're a zombie nation. What is zombie debt?
Zombie debt is going to be debt which is outside the statute of limitations. In the previous segment, we discussed statute of limitations in Florida, which is limited to 2 years, depending on the type of violation. Under the FDCPA, there's a 1-year statute of limitations regarding debt. When you ask about zombie debt, when a debt's outside of the statute of limitations, that means that you can't be sued on the debt. You have no legal obligation to continue paying it.
And I'm sorry, we can't take any more calls because we really only have about 3 minutes left. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. So when it relates to zombie debt, if the debt's outside of statute of limitations, and even though you have no obligation to pay it anymore, if you make a payment on that debt, you could quote-unquote revive that debt. You would get the zombie debt to come after you. What entities do is they will send you a letter, call you on the phone, say, hey, we know you owe $10,000 in X, Y, and Z, and they'll try and seek a payment out of you to revive the debt.
Jibrail,
Even a $20 payment on $10,000 that can restart the statute of limitations.
Exactly.
People don't realize that.
They'll
you know?
incentivize you with a huge discount. You only have to pay 5% of the total balance,
Yeah.
and then you'll be fine. But once you pay that $5, it's all over.
The zombie starts walking then.
sorry for interrupting, but real briefly, what information do you typically need to file the case? When someone calls you, what should they be prepared to have for you?
Well, if somebody calls us, basically give us the underlying facts. If you have a debt collection letter, give us that debt collection letter. Believe it or not, Phil, probably 8 out of 10 debt collection letters, me or either Tom can find a violation in it. And like we said, a violation puts $1,000 up to $1,000 in the consumer's pocket, pays your attorney's fees. I think there's one thing that I do want to touch on really, really quickly from the previous call. She said that she tells them to stop calling and they still keep calling. I think it's very important that our listeners understand that if you ever tell a company to stop calling you and they continue to call you, that is a $1,500 violation if they are using an automated dialer. How do we know if they're using an automated dialer? Call in a consumer law attorney and we'll be able to figure it out. But that's very important. We've had cases where we have recovered almost $500,000 based on calls coming in after an individual tells them to stop calling. So yes, and back to your question, debt collection letters help us. Call records help us. Just underlying facts of the type of language that was perhaps being used, and just basically educating the consumer is a very important point as well.
No? Okay. Well, can now, because of the technology, can texting or even emails be considered harassing?
Yes, actually, it can, including emails, text messages, any type of communication. If somebody leaves a Post-it note on your front door, that's a communication. The term collection letter is widely construed. If, for example, if a landlord has a lawyer write up a eviction notice,
Right.
and they post it on your door, that's an attempt to collect a debt. When the attorney is acting on behalf of the landlord, the attorney is a debt collector. Now, there's special requirements for how the frequency that the attorney would be doing this to qualify as a debt collector, but there's many instances in where they
You know,
qualify.
I really wish we had more time. We had some great calls, and I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the calls as well. We had to drop you because we're going to be going on to the 7 o'clock hour. Gentlemen, what is the best way to contact you?
There's several ways you can contact us. You can contact us by phone, and the phone number is 954-907-1136, 954-907-1136. You can go to our website. That's JibraelLaw.com, and that's spelled JIBRAEL law, LAW.com. Or you can email me, Jibrael@JibraelLaw.com.
And I like to say you guys are like a BOGO. You buy one, get one, because
Yes.
you're counsel and cold counsel. We appreciate you, Jibrael Hindi, as well as Thomas Patty. This has been a great show.
Thank you.
And we do have to run, unfortunately, Mike, you know?
Yep.